Thanks everyone for turning out in such big numbers. It's a full house here. So I'll try and do my best over the next, an hour almost. We might have to extend. I'm doing this session for the first time. So I have no idea absolutely what I'm going to time it like. I've tried to keep this an under the carpet look at the new SAT. I may not be talking about a lot of things that most of you would have access to in the public domain. So I'll try to look at, what you as counselors need to know that gives you that edge, when you're communicating with students, interacting with students. So you have an insight and how exactly your advice to them needs to change. About asking questions, it's not a very big group, so please feel free to ask questions at any point in time. I would just request you, whenever you have a question, raise your Zoom hand and I'll invite you to speak at the first available opportunity. And this time for a change, I usually, and those of you who've been a part of these sessions earlier know that I never use a presentation. I always keep it very simple. But this time, since there is too much of content involved, so I decided to go with the PPT, which I think I made after a gap of maybe 10 years. All right, I hope everybody can see my screen here. Okay, so that's the title of the session today. The digital SAT laid bare. I don't know how many appreciations do I get for a crazy title like that. So let's go ahead and take a look. And let's take a look at what lies beyond this, beyond what meets a normal human eye. When does it change? That is the first thing. So outside the US, that is all international locations from a US perspective, the new test kickstarts on March 11th, 2023, which means the SAT, which is going to be conducted on 3rd of December, would be the last paper-based test. This test started in March of 2016, and now we are retiring it in 2022, December, a full 3 years ahead of the due change. The College Board has acted mean this time. I do not know whether you know it or not, but 90% of the SAT takers are in the US, only 10% lie outside the US. The students outside the US are being forced to take the SAT a whole lot 1 year earlier, thereby acting as guinea pigs, for the larger markets that stay in the US. So if something goes wrong, although things will not go wrong, I think College Board is fairly well researched and they know what goes inside it. So I don't think they'll get it wrong internationally. But yes, theoretically, if you are an Indian student and you want to take this test, paper and pencil based test, you have that option for 1 more year by traveling to the US, but that's something I'll strictly advise against. That does not really make any sense, honestly. So these are the dates, and March 11th onwards, you will not have an option in India. If you're taking the test outside the US, it is not that you'll be given the option to test on paper or test digitally. It has to be a digital test for everyone who takes it in India. Okay. That's it. The digital SAT to me is more like, the demonetization of currency in India about 6 years ago, where the stated reasons might be very different from the factual reasons. So what is being claimed and what is the real truth might be very different. So before I proceed further, I would want to spend a few minutes here. What is it that the College Board says? They say we'll be able to deliver the test very securely. They say it's going to be a better testing experience as the new test is shorter. They have done betas, and from whatever feedback is available from the student who participated in this beta testing, they said that the new test is significantly better than the old one. It is less intimidating, it is less stressful, and these results were true for almost 90% of the students, and I agree with that. Another reason the College Board says is that it will be possible for them to turn the results out faster. Currently, it takes about 2 weeks from the test date for the results to be declared, and for some students they are even delayed beyond that because the test papers, the copies, they tend to get lost in the transit or they're delayed in the transit. So I've seen always 1 or 2 centers the results might be delayed by even up to 4 weeks, 5 weeks at times. With the digital SAT, that is not going to happen. This is what the College Board says. Let me see what is it that is the real reason for the SAT going digital. The first is the threat, distinct threat from test optional and test blind colleges. All of you are aware that the University of California went test blind for 4 years. And one of the reasons cited, in the lawsuit that they lost against a student was that students with better financial resources have got better access to test prep and then are likely to score more. I do not know how much that argument has merit, because the same applies to your school grades as well. The students with better financial resources would have access to better tutoring resources as well. But yes, the College Board is seriously scared. They're seriously threatened that if this number grows, College Board's existence is going to be in trouble. Again, test optionality, which has not really hit them as much. What they want to show with this new test is that you can prepare for the SAT, take the test, score well with minimalistic preparation, minimal time commitment, and absolutely zero financial burden on you. This is what they say. In the US, in any case, the test is paid for by the state. So the student doesn't have to pay for the test when you take it for the first time. So this is College Board's response that, the test, they say, is an answer to so many things from an admission officer side, but they let the test stay, do not kill the test. And this is what we are doing in terms of changing the test. And if you see, this is not a one-off instance. This is a series of decisions, right? They've taken multiple things. For example, taking away the optional essay in May of 2021. The SAT subject tests were done away with. They're making every single step, they're taking every single step that they can to ensure that, it becomes a simpler and easier process for the student and not a complicated. The second reason here is COVID. When COVID stuck, of all the standardized tests, the SAT test takers, they took the largest possible hit because it is still done in the old archaic way, which is paper and pencil based. Why College Board had a huge love for paper and pencil based tests is because no other test across the globe would have reached to so many test locations as the SAT had. And the SAT would take a lot of pride in that fact that, we conduct this test in maybe 180 countries. And a lot of these places would not have the tech resources for an online test to happen. But when the COVID stuck and the lockdowns, they happened, the number of test takers for the SAT suffered globally. There were crazy test cancellations. I'm sure all of you would have been a testimony to all that. On the other hand, it's better cousins, including the GMAT, the GRE, the TOEFL, and the IELTS, which were conducting their tests online already, were quickly able to evolve a take-at-home format, which may not be 100% reliable, but was 99% reliable. So the numbers drop for these tests was far lower than the SAT. And I think that's where the College Board has learned a lesson. And I think they had decided to go digital in about April, May of 2020 only. But they took one whole year to work on it before they made that announcement. They did their betas, they did their consultations, they invited the consultants to help them develop the new tests and so on and so forth. The third reason, test paper leakage. And I can tell you over the past 4 years, there is no single year when the test has not been leaked, at least once. And it is a matter of extreme shame for College Board. At times they've gone on and cancelled a center. At times they've gone on to cancel an entire country. For example, in 2020, the entire Egypt the test was cancelled. And what happens is people who were culprit of leaking the test were punished, but at the same time, a lot of good, well-intentioned students who prepared for the test and went out and took it were also punished for no fault of theirs. And such things, they give the College Board a bad name. So test paper leakage is what forced the ACT to go digital in 2018. ACT did that in a sense of huge hurry, and they paid the price. The first 3, 4, 5 administrations were a complete disaster. The College Board is doing that. They're not doing that in a sense of hurry. I mean, so they're very well prepared. I do not expect to see any headwinds or any turbulence as they migrate to the new test. Fourth, lower costs. It's delivering a test digitally is plainly cheaper, So you don't have to courier out the booklets, you don't have to receive the couriers back. The number of invigilation staff required is far lower, and they've made it easier for you by saying that you can carry your own laptop or your own tablet to the center. I do not recommend taking this test on a tablet. So whenever you advise students, keep them away from it. They must carry a laptop. And let's say if you do not have a laptop, you can borrow a laptop from the center. Although it's difficult to envisage students taking the SAT without and not having a laptop with them. That's like too far-fetched. The good thing here is that, the College Board has lowered the test fee by a good about 12-13%. I'm not aware of the exact numbers. When the ACT went digital, for some strange reason, they enhanced the fee by 25%. But out here, the College Board has passed on some of the benefit of lower costs to the students. So now digital SAT will cost, I think, about 12-13% lower than what the paper-based SAT was costing them. Again, that I think is irrelevant. One major reason for the College Board to go digital is very high cost of test creation, right? These tests are not created like the way our CBSE and ICSE papers are created by paying money to a professor who writes it and you accept it. These tests are created by a team of people who are the highest ranking professionals. And then they are standardized and then they're validated. The cost of producing one test is a few $100,000. And the College Board is sick of it. Also, even after producing few $100,000, spending few $100,000, it's not possible for them to keep on producing these tests. As a result, they've had to recycle tests. You would have seen very often a test which was previously used in the US is now used in Asia. A test which was previously used in Asia is now being used in the US. And some unscrupulous elements do take advantage of this fact, which is what they want to plug. So on the new test, the College Board would be operating from a question bank. Once it is put there, there's an engine that operates it, and they can go on and on for years and years and years. Each year, some questions are retired and some new questions are added. This is how the GMAT operates. This is how the GRE operates. This is how the TOEFL operates. So I think the College Board is moving closer to its cousins, nothing other than that. Last, but I think the most important here. And I'll be talking about this at length later. So CTT here stands for Classical Test Theory, which is an old test theory which has been around for about 300 years now. So classical test theory is what the current SAT uses. The new theory, which was made public about 40 years ago, is called as IRT, or Item Response Theory. Item Response Theory is what the GMAT is based on, what the GRE is based on, and which is what now the College Board's SAT will also be based on. IRT is a far more accurate way to test students. In fact, the leading governments across the globe, the leading government departments in the US, they all use the IRT now. So that is the end thing. It only makes sense for College Board to switch to the IRT. In fact, what they were doing earlier, they were using CTT, and that also inappropriately. I'll talk about that later. I have a whole section on CTT versus IRT. Personally, I think I've done a lot of research on this ground over the last 4 months. This is what is keeping me extremely busy. So we'll talk about CTT versus IRT at length, but yes, the new test is going to be completely IRT, or Item Response Theory driven, which will make it a next gen product, which will make it extremely accurate in terms of what it is trying to measure, and they'll completely dump the CTT, and time for CTT to go out now. The progressive institutions across the globe no longer use the CTT. So these are the real reasons why the College Board has chosen to go digital. I think they are 7 years late. They're not 3 years early. This should have happened 7 years earlier. When they changed in 2016, they might have changed to the digital format. I do not know what kept them away from it. Maybe status quoism, maybe just getting on with what has been working for them, and a resistance to change it is what brought them there. So I'll just take a look at some pieces of data. I've tried to keep data out of this presentation as much as possible. You'll find a lot of it in official College Board presentations. So one, I need to compare the time on the old test and the new test. The old test was 180 minutes, which was 100 minutes of English and 80 minutes of math. The new test is 134 minutes, which is 64 minutes of English and 70 minutes of math. There is some message in there. Can you see the drop in terms of time on the English section is significantly higher than what it is on the math section. So the new test, it goes more dovish on math, it goes more hawkish on English, which is not at all good news for us. I would have loved it had it been the other way around. So as a test prep trainer, I can tell you, I always love it when we get tougher math and easier English and not the other way around. This does not give me that kind of feeling here. But yes, it's good to see almost 46 minutes knocked off the total test. So the new test is going to be 25% shorter than the old one. Number of questions. Old test had 96 on English, 58 on math, totaling to 154. The new test has 54 English questions, 44 math questions, totaling up to 98. So the new test, the number of questions has been cut by more than a third. Again, the bulk of this pruning happens in English. Math is only fractionally lower as compared to what the previous test was. Another way to compare the old and the new test is to compare the average time per question. So total time per question. So on the old test, English was given 63 seconds per question. I'm combining the reading and the writing here. Math was given 83 seconds per question, and on an average, it was 70 seconds per question on the entire. And you can see the number of seconds per question has increased across, and it is roughly the same kind of increase, which is about in line with the total thing, which is about a 15, 16, 17% increase. Now, let's not assume that a higher amount of time per question is going to make the test easier. I've always maintained that these standardized tests, they can never go easy, they can never go difficult, because you're vying not for a score, you're vying for a rank. So all your percentile scores are ranks, they are not scores. So, sorry. So post that, I've just put down some loose thoughts. I could not really structure them very well. So we discuss them as they come. Some of the salient features of the new test. One thing, calculator is permitted throughout. Okay. Earlier, we used to have a non-calculator section and a calculator section. They've removed this anomaly by making the calculator available throughout. Who are the ones who will be benefited with this change? Typically, kids from the American curriculum, kids from the MYP curricula who get to use the calculator early, were the ones who will be benefited, because I've seen that these kids are the ones who struggle the most in the non-calculator section of the old SAT, because they're so habitual of using the calculators. These are typically students where you tell them 16 times 8 is how much, and out comes the calculator. Let me quit here. So our CBSE and ISC, ICSE students, they suffer a bit because this was a distinct strength with them, which is no longer available. So in fact, life for CBSE and ICSE students becomes difficult because most of them were so comfortable working without a calculator that some of them would simply refuse to use the calculator, even if it is offered to them. So they will now have to take intense sessions training themselves on how to use the graphing calculator. An on-screen calculator, which is a Desmos version, which is a global leader in on-screen graphing calculators, is available on the test application. My very sincere request to all students not to use the on-screen calculator. Why? Because when you open up the on-screen calculator, it blocks off everything else. So you cannot look at the question and use the calculator at the same time. So you should always have your own calculator and take it to the examination center, which is permitted, so that you can look at the question and do your calculations at the same time. The on-screen calculation is best avoided. Please do not use the on-screen calculator. It is not going to serve any purpose whatsoever. Next, you cannot take this test at home. So many people approaching me, oh, now we'll be able to take it at the comfort of our home. No, you cannot take it in the comfort of your home. You will have to go to a test center and take the test over there. Registrations for the March and the May SAT and the June SAT have opened already. Yes, there's going to be 2 additional attempts next year onwards. Currently, the SAT is conducted 5 times a year, which is March, May, August, October, and December. From 2023, 2 more administrations will be added, one in June and the other one in November. Both of them are welcome additions for Indian students, right? A lot of my ISC and CBSE students who finish off their exams towards the second week of March, they find the May test too soon, and after May, the next one was August. So the June test is appropriately positioned for them. And on the other end, people who've taken one test in August want to repeat it. October becomes too soon and December starts clashing with their exams. I think the November test is fantastic addition here. So we get more options now. It's going to be 7 times a year. Yes, you cannot take it at home. You have to travel to a center. Now you are permitted to take your own laptop, which is something you are very comfortable working with. So the College Board will get you to download an app, and you can go and use that app at the same time. The app is cheating proof. Once you open up that app, you cannot do anything else on your laptop. And most of this test would be taken in the offline. So it will be connected only towards the beginning and towards the end of the test. So very, very safe, sound, robust technology. And plus they'll be clicking pictures at regular intervals, which will be uploaded along with the test responses. How long will it take to get the results? IRT calculations are a little complicated, but my guess here is they have not published any date so far. My guess here is that a week is the max time that they'll need to publish the test results. It's still going to be English first and math later. So a lot of my students, they wish the math section to be done earlier and the English one later. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen here. They still have to go through the English first and the math later. Also, this English is not being called English here. The College Board has some huge love for reading and writing sections that they created earlier with the old test, which was the last new test, in fact, launched in the current test, which is going out. They call it RW. RW stands for reading, writing. That's it. They call it RW. Math remains math. So we not say it is English and math. It's going to be RW and math. College Board has again gone on to retain its love for some of, its old type of question that has been carrying. One of them was earlier known as the grid-in problems in math, where you are not given multiple choices, but you have to produce an answer and write it in terms of number of digits. So the grid-in problems stay. The only thing which has changed is their name. Now they're called as SPR questions, or student-produced responses, to which now you can answer both positive and negative. On the old test, you could have positive numbers only. So and you can type in up to 6 characters, including a negative sign. So the student produced responses, they stay, and they are going to be roughly, 25% of the total test. So if we have 44 questions on math, you can expect about 10 to 11 questions, which are student produced responses. One very big difference that this one has from the old one is, on the old test, on both the English and math sections, you had clubbed question items. On English, they were all clubbed. So English, on reading, we had 5 passages, each having 10 to 11 questions. On writing, we had 4 passages, each having 11 questions each. On the new test, each question is going to be an independent item. So one passage now is going to have only 1 question supporting it, which means the passages go shorter. Each passage would now be limited to 150 words. That is what the College Board says. You can have no more than 900 characters in the question statement of a passage, including the question, but not including the options. So shorter passages, but there are going to be too many of them. So how it translates, I think it is too early to say. In my opinion, it stays the same. It does not make things any easy or any difficult for the student. You're still supposed to read at the same rate. It does not go down. So all questions are independent items. Even in math, we had questions where the same data set was leading to 2 or 3 questions. They'll all be gone. Now, one data set is going to support only one question, which is true in the spirit of IRT, because if you have club questions, then the item response theory cannot be implemented. That's a drawback that we have here. The only change I could find in the structure of the test is questions based on poetry. So you'll have typically about 2 to 3 questions where you'll not be given a passage, you'll be given a poem that you have to go through, decipher it, and answer the question attached to it. Would it be very difficult? I do not think so. I don't think so. But it will be difficult enough to scare off students who are not prepared for the test. All right, moving on. I have a lot of loose thoughts scribbled here. So reading passages will be limited to 150 words. Wordy problems in math are gone. The math section here, it used to be more a test of reading than being a test of math. And it had plenty full of questions where the objective of the examiner was to trap the student in the way the questions have been framed. And some of them would be real long wordy problems. They are gone completely. Word problems are not gone. Word problems stay, but wordy problems which sought to confuse the student with enormity of text or data, they have been completely taken off. I could distinctly see a greater emphasis on vocabulary, but I don't think the kids would be required to cram vocabulary like we used to do in the pre-2016 SAT from a word list. That doesn't factor in, but yes, you will have to have a greater eye open towards vocabulary. It'll still be contextual vocabulary only. There's not going to be GRE type words here. One new feature is experimental questions. So, whereas in the English section, you have 54 questions. On the math section, you have 44 questions. 4 questions on English and 4 questions on math are going to be experimental. So there are 2 English sections and there are 2 math sections. So 4 sections, each section has 2 experimental questions, which will never be evaluated. College board will use these questions to produce future tests. Even now, somebody who has been taking the test in the US was taking 5 sections, not 4. The 5th section was an experimental section. Experimental sections and questions have been around in all these standardized tests for a very long time. In fact, the previous SAT internationally was the only test where we had nothing experimental. So they come back. How do I handle these experimental questions? You will never know which questions are experimental. So you got to attempt all of them to the best of your capability. There's going to be a unique test form for each student. No 2 students will get the same question paper under the new scheme. They'll all be drawn from a question bank. But yes, these questions are going to be of the same level of difficulty. That is what the College Board promises, which is statistically speaking very much possible. There is no problem with that. It's doable. They say this is being done to reduce cheating and stuff like that. Well, I do believe them. It will certainly help if every single student gets a different test form. The only downside is that if a student messed up the test, there is no way you can figure out what happens because the College Board would not be releasing these test papers later on. In that sense, it will become like the ACT, just getting a score, nothing beyond that. College Board has released 4 practice papers already. So if you make an account on the College Board account and then it prompts you to download the Blue Book. Blue Book is the app that they use for this testing. The Blue Book has 4 sample papers loaded on it. And that's all. They will not be releasing any more sample papers. They've made it very clear. So for students, my advice is please do not take these sample papers just for the heck of it. Preserve these for the final moments of your preparation when you're fully prepared, because this is a precious resource. Please do not waste it. You can superscore the old test with the new one. So the College Board says the 1500 on the old test is the same as the 1500 on the new test. So if you've taken the test twice, once on the old format, once in the new format, you can use maybe 1 section score from the old one, 1 section score from the new one. That would be acceptable to all colleges. They've categorically stated that. Okay, what else? Practice is available on Khan Academy has opened up a whole new section on the new digital SAT, which is I think, which is a modification of their existing content. But there is There are no practice papers on Khan Academy. A question bank would be released by College Board by January, which will have a more bigger, greater pool of questions that you can practice. Reading and writing are no longer distinct sections. On the old test, we had a reading section and we had a writing section as well. They were distinct sections. On the new section, they are merged into one, which is called as RW. And if we look at this RW section, it has a greater bias towards reading. So proportionately, there are more reading questions, even though the College Board states that both of them are equal. Detailed look at this test does not reveal that. It has a clear, distinct reading bias. Also, there's a slight departure towards critical reading, which is more like GMAT-like. More GMAT-like, slight departure, not much of it. By and large, it remains a test of reading. It remains a test of reading. So in a nutshell, it's the same old test, which is now being measured and evaluated differently. So as I say, it's like the old test has been given a haircut. They've removed all the whiskers and stuff like that, made it look much more neat and clean, done some makeup, given it some facial and the foundation. It looks a very neat, clean, good to go kid, right? It's more responsive to our new generation, where everything which is short has got more meaning. So this is the Reels generation. They're driven by the Instagram Reels and not with documentaries that we were used to. They would not have the patience to sit and watch a 30-minute documentary. So I think the College Board is acting along the same lines, and they're taking it closer towards what the current generation likes. And I would not be surprised if we see the ACT reacting with a very similar change in less than a year's time, because if you have the ACT that takes 3 hours and the SAT that takes 2 hours and 15 minutes, trust me, in the US, nobody would opt for the ACT, especially this generation. If you can do it in 2 hours and 15 minutes, that is going to become the test of choice for everyone. Currently, they're all neck and neck, absolutely. Okay. All right. Now I come now to the most important part. Multi-stage adaptive test. So this is now going to be a multi-stage adaptive test. Some of you might have heard this term about adaptive testing. So what is this adaptive test and how does it operate? Let me talk about that for a moment. The classiest adaptive test available today is the GMAT or the Graduate Management Admission Test. GMAT is a test which is question adaptive, which means it is mandatory for you to attempt all questions. There is no way you can leave a question unattempted. When you attempt a question, your next question might be tougher or easier depending upon your response to the current question is correct or incorrect. If your response to the current question is correct, you will get a tougher second question, but your scores will inch higher. If you get an incorrect answer to the current question, you will get an easier second question, but your scores will dip lower. And this is dynamically keeps on adjusting. This is what is classically called as an IRT or item response theory driven multi-stage adaptive test. Right now, the SAT is not going to be like the GMAT. It is going to be like the GRE, right? A multi-stage adaptive test. Let's see what is going to be the norm here. So there will be 2 sections each for math and English. So when you start with an English test, and everybody gets a test which is of a similar level of difficulty, which is called as your English Part 1, right? Within this English Part 1, which is going to have 27 questions, 25 evaluated and 2 experimental, this operates just like the old test. You can go forward, you can go back, you can skip questions, you can come back to questions, and you can change answers, right? Once the time is over for this section, which is 32 minutes, you press end section. This test is going to be evaluated in real time. And now you'll get a second English section, which might be easier or which might be tougher depending upon what you scored on the first section. If you scored well on the first section, you will get a tougher second section and your scores will move higher. If you scored not so good on the first section, you will get a easier second section and a ceiling would be established to your score. Getting good score on the first section establishes a floor. So if I did well on the first section, even if you mess up the second section, your scores cannot go below a certain level. At the same time, if I messed up my first section, I'm getting an easier second section, but a ceiling is established and your scores cannot go above a certain section. There is a lot of speculation about how many possibilities are there for the second section. There are only two. The College Board has categorically stated. They have published a 192-page document, which of course people like us have to put them under a magnifying glass and read through them page by page, word by word. So there are only two possibilities, a first section and two possible second sections. Similarly, when they migrate to math, everybody gets a first section, which is of the same level of difficulty for every student. And based on your performance on that particular section, you might get a section which might be tougher, which might be easier, which might be tougher, which might be easier. And accordingly, the floor or the ceiling of the score would be established. So the first score establishes a broad score range, and the second section places you somewhere in that range, leading to better measurement. Though there might be some overlap. So it is not exactly as simple as it sounds. A little complicated, but I think I've given you a broad idea about how it works. So we did a lot of R&D with the College Board tests, which are available now. I have a 4-people team which is doing that full time. So it suggests that usually 65 to 70% accuracy on the first test is good enough to get you a harder second section. And second, unlike the contrary belief that this is going to be an ability-based test, because the IRT seeks to measure abilities and not individual questions, the truth here is that all questions will contribute to score, though not equally. I'll talk about this later. This is a huge departure from the previous norm, where all questions used to carry equal marks. On the new test, all questions will not carry equal marks. They're going to be subtle differences. All right, so this is, I think, as much you need to know about adaptive testing, multi-stage testing. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them up when the time comes. Now, let me come down to CTT versus IRT, or the classical test theory, which I told you was 300 years old, and the item response theory, which is very, very recent. So what is the difference? Classical test theory is about 300 years old, and it has about 10% standard error of measurement. Despite SEM stands for standard error of measurement, despite having a standard error of measurement, why do we use it? Because a multiple choice type question or testing is known to be distinctly better than any other form of testing. And in CTT, ideally how it should happen is the test should be post-standardized, because the results are dependent on group and test type. So when you create the bell curve for a classical test theory, it's a different bell curve for each test, for each group of test takers. Although the College Board has been cheating all of us there. So they are using classical test theory, but they pre-standardize the test on a small sample, and then they expand it to a larger sample, which is a perfectly acceptable norm with IRT, but not with CTT. So though it is there, they've been using it. It is incorrect. Unfortunately, there is nobody to question them. Thankfully, I have come across some of the top statisticians across the globe, some of the top psychometricians across the globe. So that gives me a detailed, inside look into all these technical terminologies. I've tried to simplify them as much as I could, but if it still sounds Greek, I apologize about the same. So IRT is the latest theory and has less than 1% standard error of measurement. The calculations required on the IRT to publish a result are, I think, about 1,000 times more complex than what you require for the CT. And in absence of a very, very complicated software, you can never do that. In fact, the number of people I think who can advise you on how to develop an IRT based test today across the globe would be a single digit number. It would not be a double digit number. IRT, the best part is it is not dependent on the ability of the test taking. It will always get you the same results because the items are individually standardized. And the results are extremely reliable. IRT is not being, today the US Police Department uses it for their recruitment. The US Health Services, they use it. The NASA uses it. So many national governments of so many countries use IRT. So IRT is the end thing. Everything progressively is moving towards the IRT. We are not far off from a date where even our own JEEs and our own NEETs are going to be IRT-based tests, which is accurate test delivery in a shorter amount of time, more accurate measurement. So this change is welcome. Okay, the GMAT and the GRE have been using IRT for quite some time. It focuses on establishing ability level. So the ideal IRT based test is the recursive test with an infinite number of rounds. And as you approach a standard deviation which is desirable, the test stops. But out here it is two-stage, which should give you very good results. But still we feel that there's going to be about 1% error of measurement. So what are the implications? It will mean less testing fatigue for the student. So whereas I had to expose the student to get to 154 questions to get the same results, now I'll be able to do it by exposing them to a mere 98 questions. So, and then you'll have the results of the same reliability, in fact, better reliability as compared to CTT. Okay, let's move forward. What happened? Yeah, thank you. What is the most important difference here? Old test, all questions carry equal. On the new test, all questions do not carry equal marks. Even on the old test, whereas different questions were of a different level of ability, they carried equal marks, thereby creating opportunity costs. And a smart student who's a good test taker could capitalize on that. On the new test, that is not available. It is all ability-based testing. So I'll tell you how it happened on the old test and how it happens on the new test. Supposing I want to test you for grammar. On the new test, I'll give you 2 questions from subject-verb agreement, 2 questions from pronouns, 2 questions from modifiers, 2 questions from parallelism, and I'll be able to grade your ability in general on that subject called grammar. How do I change it on the IRT? I'm not going to pick up all 5-6 topics. I'll just pick up one. I'll say, okay, let me give the student questions based on modifier only. So I'll give you 6-7 questions on modifiers, which are in a progressively increasing level of difficulty. And then I see how far you can travel. Do you start making mistakes at question 5 or at question 6 or at question 7? From these 7, accordingly, I'm going to grade. Accordingly, I'm going to grade you. So this is one major difference. Now, that is one reason, one challenge, huge challenge here. If I take up 1 sample paper and 2 sample papers, and I master modifiers, because the first one had questions on modifiers, the second one had questions on pronouns. I mastered these 2 topics thoroughly, and I go into the test to find that all my 7 questions are from subject-verb agreement. I could be completely stumped. And because the College Board is not releasing papers, it is going to be a long and arduous task to put these feedbacks from students in place and to give a shape. Although I think we'll be able to give shape to this test within no time. We're already working on it. So what are the implications of this shift to IRT? Test taking strategies assume lower significance. My current program said Saturn paper, 50% of training to the student is test taking strategies, benefiting from the opportunity costs. Silly mistakes on easy questions, which are a huge drag down for a very good student, they will now attract lower penalty if they are on easy questions. Because if you got a question or 2 which was easy, incorrect, which was a silly mistake, and you get the tougher ones right, you'll still be penalized, but that penalty is going to be minor. Earlier, that penalty was linear. Test prep companies will have to focus on ability development. That is the good and the bad part of it. And thankfully, we realized it very early. We're working on it already. Solving a large number of practice papers may no longer be the route to success, which has been true for ages. You take a large number of mocks and you analyze them, you look at your mistakes, you work on them. It's not going to work. You will have to be more specific and work on ability involved. What are the implications? Limited practice content is available, and this will not increase with time. Right? Last time when the test changed, it was completely different content. And very soon you had multiple people publishing your content, a lot of stuff was available. The new test is not new content. It is 98% of it is the same content as you were using for the old SAT, though it will be structured differently. And you will be full of publishers and online developers willing to take the markets and the students for a ride. You know, last time when the test changed, I saw 2 books on Amazon which were available from the US. Student's Guide to the New SAT by Dr. Alexander Hamilton, PhD. So I ordered them. It cost me $400. Amazon charged me another $250 to deliver them to India. And when I got those books, it had 2 volumes. Volume 1 was geometry, volume 2 was everything else. So I knew I had been duped and I could not even return the books. Why? Because geometry, which was 45% of the old test, maybe 50%, is only 4% of the new test. So all such sorts of unscrupulous players will emerge, unfortunately, and the students will not have any which ways to differentiate between what is authentic and what is not. I could see, you know, even multiple test prep companies giving students 10 classes on vocabulary for this test, which is going out, whereas you don't need even half a class on vocabulary. Unfortunately, the student cannot differentiate and they cannot make out. So we need to be watchful on that. Last part, what is our response? The first response I had was that our name is redundant. The SAT would no longer have paper in it. So Saturn paper becomes meaningless. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to change our name. So we're changing our name to Zuperscore, Z-U-P-E-R-S-C-O-R-E, Zuperscore. So you'll very soon see all new branding, all new designs. Just like the SAT has been given a haircut, I think my organization and me also, I haven't had a time for a haircut in the last 10 days. I've been working like crazy. But the organization now gets a haircut. We'll get a mascot in place. We'll get some jazzy designs in place. Now comes the big announcement. I told you there are less than a dozen people, in fact, less than 10 people who have the capability to develop IRT-based tests. We are working with 2 of them right now. And the leading organization across the globe, which is Assessment Systems Corporation from Minneapolis, US, we have signed in South Asia exclusive contract with them, and that is for a price that will make us put back everything that we earned last year on the table. So we signed that contract for almost $300,000 US, and they've been doing it. These people, they have NASA, they have they have the US Health Services, the US Police Department as their clients. They're working with multiple national governments. So they're helping us develop these tests in an advanced stage of development. I think we should be able to publish the first authentic set by January 10th. This is something which would be developed using the same architecture that the College Board uses from scratch. Right from question creation to its validation to publishing, it's going to be as authentic as the College Board makes it. Starting 15th of December, we will start conducting the diagnostic test in the new format. We've tied up with global leaders. We have another consultant from South Africa who's advising us in addition. We're also developing, we have developed a desktop-based app, which is identical to the Blue Book. Blue Book is the app that the College Board uses. So on our new application, is an offline application. So when you take the test, you're not required to be connected to the internet. In fact, you're not permitted to be connected to the internet. If you connect to the internet, the test stops. So this helps us in containing cheating at students at our level, which has been giving us some headaches of late. So, we've developed it now. It's only meant to be published now. We developed it, meant to be tested and published it. Even we are our two tech teams, one of which currently sits out of Bangalore and the other one sits out of Hyderabad. So, and I've been visiting both Bangalore and Hyderabad every month for the past 5 months now, and staying put over there for 3-4 days every time I go there. And last, our experience with tech. When the ACT went digital, we were the first people to go up with the digital testing, app for the ACT, something which is giving us phenomenal results. This year, I would be very glad to share with you. We have got 18 perfect ACT scores in 2022 alone, which I think would be 8, 9, 10 times of our nearest competitors. That is and a lot of credit goes to our testing application. Second, we do a one-on-one prep. So whereas we are not really doing the tests online for our students, we have been evaluating them online. And this is like a jackpot to us. Jackpot in the sense, I now have 30 months of authentic test evaluation data with me. And this data is goldmine. Anybody who's working on batches and verbally correcting the test for students would not have this data. So when I was talking to these people, Nathan Thompson, who's the guy who's working with us, I said, how many use cases you need? Because you need use cases to standardize the test. He said, Abhinav, 200 would be good for us. I said, I have 1,500. What do you say about that? This is a gold mine. We'll be able to give you an excellent product based on 1,500 use cases. And we easily have that. And since they're all software recorded, so it will not take us a lot of time. We're already in the process of getting it from there. What else? We go live on January 1st, 2023. That is the launch date, proposed launch date for Superscore. I'll be sending out mailers to everyone. We'll be inviting all your students to try our new app out. We'll also be coming up with a test series product. The current product, we're not making it for the Indian markets, though all our students get it. We plan to premiere it in the US market sometimes in October of 2023. And I would wait to see. This will be one product which is developed in India, which will be sold in the US. So unlike most of the products which are developed in the US and sold in India, we're trying to take it back to them. We are ideally positioned to make use of that. Why? Because we have a large number of students that provides us with the use cases. We currently have about a team of 75 academicians who can produce content for us at a pace faster than what any of the Americans can do. The cost of development for us is I think 1/10 of what the cost of development per question is there for a US player. The only gap was tech. We are bridging that very fast. We're working on it. At any point in time, if any of you has a question or is stuck somewhere, please do not hesitate to write to me. You can reach me on LinkedIn, and Devesh would request you to share my email address and my mobile number here. If anyone wants to reach me out at any point in time for any questions that you have, for any support that you need, it will be my pleasure. It will be my absolute pleasure to do whatever I can in my capacity. Satin Paper, of course, is India's leading test prep company today, both in terms of size and results. We're a team of 150 professionals, and we're completely virtual. We've been like this since 2016. We are currently working with students from some 60 countries across the globe very successfully. You can visit us at satinpaper.com. Quite a few of you are personally known to me, so thanks for joining in. And I think that's all that I had to say. If anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to take them up right now.